Masechet Yoma Daf Chaf Zayin. Two main topics today. One is the source that a non-Kohen is allowed to skin and cut the tamid. All right, we saw that already that the non-Kohen can do shechita, and he can also then, once the animal's hung up, he can cut it into pieces. So the Kohanim have to do everything after that. They have to do all accept the blood and sprinkle it on the mizbeach. They're the Kohanim have to bring it up the ramp and put it onto the fire. But these two items a non-Kohen can do. We're going to look for the source. We're going to find three different ways of proving it. And then on Daf Amud Bet, we're going to see a non-Kohen who arranged the wood is liable. A non-Kohen may not arrange the wood. So let's begin with the Mishnah that says, Ayil Kare B'Hadasar. So far, this whole perek, we're talking about the Korban Tamid, and we mentioned that the Korban Tamid has 13 people that are involved. Out of the 13, 9 of them are carriers, right, carrying things up the ramp. Out of those 9, 5 are carrying actual flesh, right, flesh and bones. The other 4 are carrying the intestines, which are not considered flesh and bones, and the oil and the wine. So usually there's 5. Now we're going to talk about other animals that are sacrificed that are bigger, and they require more kohanim to carry up the various limbs. So an ayil is going to be 11. Habasar b'chamisha. So the meat itself, the flesh will be 5, the same as a korban tamid, which is a lamb. So the ram and the lamb are the same, but in this case, the intestines and the flour and the wine, you need 2 each because those are greater quantities. And so you have 5 plus 2 times 3, that is 6. 5 plus 6 is 11. And so that's how you get 11. Now, par kare be'asim ve'arba'a. If you're bringing a cow, that is a lot bigger, a bull actually, male. If you're bringing a bull, that is huge. So you're going to need a lot more people to carry all the limbs of the bull. You need 24 people. And here's how it goes. Still the same limbs, harosh v'haregel, the head always goes first. Remember, we bring the head together with the right hind leg because we want to have some meat on it. So harosh b'echad, one person carries the bull's head. V'haregel b'shnayim, the hind leg, pretty big. You need 2 kohanim to carry that. That's 3. Oketz v'haregel, the tail and the left back leg. Oketz b'shnayim, tail itself or the hind part requires 2. The regel, the hind leg, another 2. That's another 4, so up to 7. The chest and the neck area needs 1 and 3 each. That's another 4, so we're up to 11. Each of the 4 legs is carried by 2. That's another 4, 15. The 2 sides are 2 each. That's 19. And 3 each. For each of the, I added one too many. Okay, 3 each, another 6 for the intestines of the oil and the wine. That's 3 each, and that adds up to 24. So there you go. For a bull, we need 24 people. All this that we've been talking about, that you need this many kohanim to split it up, that's talking about a communal sacrifice. However, it's an individual sacrifice, then you could do whatever you want. If I bring a sacrifice, my friend is a kohen, and I say, I want you to do everything, you carry everything, you get the zechut, then he can do that. So individuals can decide however they want to split it up. This is going to be the main line that we're going to discuss the most today, that the skinning of the animal and cutting it and butchering it into the different limbs is the same law regarding communal and individual. In what way are they the same? The Mishnah doesn't say, but the first line of the Gemara does. Tana Baraita adds, Hefshetan v'nituchan shavin bezar. In what way are they similar? That whether it's an individual or communal sacrifice, a non-Kohen is allowed to do that job. So a non-Kohen can do shechita, and a non-Kohen can skin it and cut it up. Okay, so now we're going to spend the first Amud discussing a source for that, and we'll see 3 different ways. The first will be rejected, the third will be accepted. Amar Chizkiya minayin lehevshet v'nituach sheshaveh bezar. How do we know that skinning and cutting is kosher with a non-kohen. Shenemar v'natenu b'nei Aaron hakohen esh al hamizbeach nitinat esh ba'aya kehuna heshet v'nituach la ba'aya kehuna. Since the pasuk says that Aaron and the kohanim are going to put the fire on the mizbeach, so that means from that point on, it has to be done by a kohen. But the heshet v'nituach, which is done earlier in the is before that in the pasuk, does not. Okay, to understand this better, let's look at the pisukim. This is in Vayikra chapter 1, which is talking about an olah. This first paragraph is talking about if it's a bull. The second paragraph is if it's a lamb, a small animal. So regarding the bull, this is if you just go through the pisukim, right, and say who does which jobs, right? So v'samach yado, that's singular. That's the person that's bringing that bull, right? So he does semicha. Of course, the owners do semicha. So that's for sure the owner, who is a Yisrael. I mean, it could be anyone. And v'nirsa l'chaper alav. And then the next pasuk, that's 4-5, says v'shachat. So v'shachat, who is that? That's the same person that did the semicha, so that's the owner. So I put the owner's thing, meaning Yisrael, in blue. Then I made in red anything that Kohanim do. So this is clearly so then you see that clearly this the Kohanim that have to sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach. Good. Now 6 is in between, right? We're going to have Kohanim again after. Who is doing that, right? I mean, it isn't singular. The Gemara doesn't talk about the singular plural. I'm just pointing this out that right, the Kohanim are always in plural here. So Vivshit seems to go back to the owner, that he's the one, and he's a Yisrael, and he can do the hafshata, the skinning, and the nitachoto, cutting it into pieces. And then then the Kohanim have to go and set up the fire, right? Put the wood on there, and then they have to take the limbs and it lists them, Arosh Padet, right? This is how we know that these come first, and they put them on the wood that's on the fire, that's on the Mizbeach. And the rest they wash in water, the intestine they wash in water, and they put that on the Mizbeach as well. So you see here that I think from a Peshat point of view, it really does make sense that the Israel can do shechita and the skinning and the cutting. So this is what we're going to analyze. What we saw so far is V'natinu b'nei Aaron, V'natinu, right? This comes right after the skinning and the cutting. And if it says this has to be done by Aaron, the setting up of the fire, then that means whatever comes right before does not have to be done by Aaron. So this is, a very, very straightforward Peshat reading. Very good. But now we question it. Wait, maybe you need this pasuk v'natenu for itself. We have to know that it's the Kohanim that actually are the ones that have to do the arrangement of the wood. So maybe this is not saying and not what came before, but just tell you that yes, this has to be done by, right, and including what came before. So maybe this V'natenu is not exclusive of what came before, but just inclusive of what comes, because we need to know that. And then you couldn't learn from it. So to reject this, we say Amar Rav Simi bar Ashi ashkachte le'Abaye dava mazbar le'Dibre. Well, I was lucky enough. I happened to come upon Abaye when he was explaining the following halakha to his son, which is a really nice scene. You don't usually find this kind of attribution. Abaye teaching his son. So what was he teaching him? V'shachat shechita bezar keshera. Since pasuk says, right, v'shachat, who's doing that? It's right after v'samach. So non-kohen can do shechita. V'chi me'ayin bata mikla shelma bata banecha itach tishmiru et kunatchem shemani afelu shechita. So why do we even need to learn this? Because another pasuk, this is later in Bemidbar 18, it says to the kohanim, you and your children, you have to make sure to safeguard your priesthood by doing all the necessary steps that kohanim have to do. So I might have thought maybe even shechita, that seems to be part of the process. No, Talmud Omar v'shachat et ben habakar lifnei Adonai v'ikribu b'nei Aaron ha'kohanim et hadam mikabala ve'elach mitzvat kihuna v'samach yado v'shachat imad ha'shechita shekeshera bezar. So since it says v'ikribu right after v'shachat, here in this v'shachat, and then v'ikribu, that shows that only from the blood work, meaning from the holacha, taking it into the mizbeach and on, that's what the Kohanim have to do. But before that, the shechita itself, that comes right after v'samach yado. So that a non-Kohen could do. Abraham, you have a question?
Yes. So, but meanwhile, there's a lottery for which Kohen's going to do the shechita.
Correct. There is a lottery, and that's because even though technically the non-Kohen could do it, but the Kohanim love doing it. So usually they would do it no matter what, because they were zealous and they wanted to have that mitzvah. But you're right, and if certainly if an individual comes and brings something, they have first right, they can do shechita. And we're talking about the Korban Tamid, it's a communal sacrifice. So, I said the other day, maybe if the president is in town, he throws the first pitch, right? So, maybe they would let him do it. But in the standard case, the Kohen would do shechita. So which Kohen's going to do it? So they make a lottery. Okay, your point is going to come up again, actually, today. So keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Mekedi mikabala va'elach misvat kehuna v'natenu b'nei Haron lamali. Now we have another question. Since you just said from receiving the blood, after shechita, the one who receives the blood and takes it, walks it, sprinkles it, from then on, everything is done by the Kohanim. So the next pasuk of v'natenu, I'll show you again, v'natenu here, putting the fire on the mizbeach, that's a step that's done after the blood is received, right? I mean, it's after in the Pesukim. So why do you even have to say that? Why do you even need this pasuk, right? Isn't it obvious? If it comes after, then the Kohen has to do it. Oh, so this is to exclude hefshet v'nituach, that the skinning and the cutting can be done by a non-Kohen. Okay, so yeah, so this is another way that we can learn the same law. Salka datech amina kevan delav avoda deme'akava kaparahi latiba kehuna kamashmalan deba'e kehuna. No, so why do I need to say that? I still need it because I may have thought, since it's not an avodah, that is why the putting the fire on the putting the wood on the mizbeach is not a service that prevents it from being atoned. If Yisrael would do it, then the korban would still be okay. It would still atone. So I might think that since it doesn't prevent the atonement, therefore a non-Kohen could do it. And that's why you're right. Even though this natenu comes afterwards, and so it would be obvious that a Kohen has to do it, since it's not an essential act, I might have thought a non-Kohen could do it. That's why the pasuk has to go back and say, yes, and the Kohanim do have to do it. Okay, Ella mehacha. So the point now, so far we just rejected this v'natenu, right? Our first way of learning it was, look, it says v'natenu here. This comes to exclude what came before. The Kohanim have to do this and on the wood, but not what came before. But now we just proved that we need this pasuk for itself to teach me that, in fact, he has to do the fire, because I might have thought that fire is non-essential, so therefore the Kohanim don't have to do it. So I need this pasuk to tell me the Kohanim do have to do it, even though it's not essential. So this pasuk is talking about what comes afterwards, and therefore not to exclude what came right before. So maybe pasuk 6 is also with Kohanim. So I don't have a proof yet. So rather, we're going to prove it from here. Ela mehacha ve'arechu b'nei Aaron haKohanim et hanetachim et harosh ve'et hapader mikedi mekabala ve'elach misvat kehuna ve'arechu lamali lemut hefshet v'nituach. So from this pasuk 8, ve'arechu, the Kohanim have to do this and on. In other words, they have to take the parts of the animal and put it on the fire. So you see, from here on, from the placement of the limbs on the fire and on, is their responsibility. Before that, meaning the cutting of the limbs, is not their responsibility. That a non-Kohen could do. So that's what we're going to learn it from the word ve'arechu. Okay. Ve'ema le'ma'ute sidur shenei gezirei atzim. So no, how do you know it's because of that? Maybe this is coming to include, ve'arechu is coming to exclude the putting of the wood on the fire, that the placing of the wood has to be done by a Kohen. but not it's not coming to exclude. How do you know it's coming to exclude something, right? That from here on the Kohen has to do it. How do you know it's coming to exclude placing the limbs? Maybe it's coming to exclude the putting the wood on it, which is actually what came right before. That says, okay, for the Kohanim have to put the wood on. So I have to put the limbs on, but maybe not the wood. The wood is something that the non-Kohen can do. Now we say no. It makes sense that it's going to exclude something similar to itself, which is that it's more reasonable excluding something related to the actual animal, the limbs of the animal. So just as it says, the limbs of the animal, the Kohen has to put on, and not has to cut it, right? So it makes sense as to doing something with the limbs of the animal, so therefore it will be a good proof. But we reject that. So no, the opposite. Maybe it's talking about placement that's similar to it. Since this pasuk says the Kohanim have to place the limbs on the animal, that's coming to exclude the placement of something else, meaning the logs. So they don't have to place the logs on it. And then in that case, you would not have a proof that the skinning and the flay and the cutting can be done by a non-Kohen. We say no, la sakadatech. This assumption here that a non-Kohen could do the logs is impossible. So we wouldn't need this pasuk for that. How do we know that's impossible? Damar mod ve'ikri b'kohen et hakol hamizbecha zo holachat ebarim lakevesh. Because we already said that when we said the Kohen brings everything on the mizbeach, this is later in pasuk 13 in the next paragraph, which is talking about the son, and it says the Kohen brings everything on mizbeach. So this refers to bringing the pieces onto the ramp. So this proves that putting the fire has to be done by a Kohen, but not taking the limbs on the animal is required by a priest. Therefore, bringing up the logs is not required by a Kohen. But okay, fine. If you learn that this is inference from an inference, if you need to tell me that carrying the wood does not require a Kohen, then that would mean that actually placing the wood onto the mizbeach that is required by a Kohen. So anyway, the point is that we do know that already that the Kohen has to place the logs on the mizbeach, and therefore I would not make this comparison. Instead, this ve'arechu is coming to exclude the cutting of the limbs. The Kohen has to bring up the limbs, but does not have to cut the limbs. Okay, so now this is our second proof. Right, so this would be seems to be a good proof. But now we reject this one also. Maybe we need Baruchu to teach us another law in and of itself. So this is a pasuk we're talking about here, Ve'arechu, right? We said maybe Ve'arechu, they have to bring up the pieces, the limbs, but not cut it. But now we're about to learn in just a few seconds that Ve'arechu is going to teach us the number that you need 2 Kohanim to do this. And so therefore, you know what? We actually need this pasuk for a different reason, as we'll see. So now we're going to come to our third proof that a non-Kohen, third and final proof that a non-Kohen can do the skinning and the cutting. So we're going to go moving down the line. We can't learn it from pasuk 7 and not from pasuk 8, but rather from pasuk 9. The Kohen puts everything on the mizbeach. Why do you have to say that he puts everything on the mizbeach? The point is that from the placing on the mizbeach and onwards, the Kohen has to do everything. But something that happened before that, the Kohen does not have to do it. What is it talking about? Back in pasuk 6, the cutting, the flaying and the cutting. All right, so that is the final proof. And now we're going to go back and explain what we need that ve'arechu for, which I mentioned. The pasuk in the next paragraph that says he brings everything up, that's talking about that the Kohen has to put everything onto the ramp. This is all repetition, what we said before, we're just reviewing. So carrying the limbs has to be done by a Kohen. Carrying the logs does not have to be done by a Kohen. So therefore, actually putting the logs on the Mizbeach needs to be done by a Kohen. So that's what we need the word natinu for. That's what we need Pasuk 7. And Pasuk 8 also we need V'arechu Shenayim, B'nei Aaron Shenayim, HaKohanim Shenayim, Lamanu Letareh Sheta'on Shisha. Since it has 2, 2, and 2 in this Pasuk in 1:8, that's how we know that when you're carrying a lamb, it has to be done with 6 people, 5 for the flesh and bones, and another 1 for the intestines that he carries in a bowl. So that's 6. Okay, so that's what we learned from here. Now this pasuk is problematic to use for 6 because it's talking about 1:8. If you remember here, pasuk 8 is in the paragraph regarding the bull, the large animal, which the Mishnah said requires 24 people, and the pasuk that you're learning is in here, right? 2, 2, and 2. So how can you use this paragraph to teach, which is about a bull, to teach you something about a lamb, which actually should be in the next paragraph? So that's what we're going to address now. This paragraph is talking about the bull. And that needs 24. Are we inferring it even though you're right, it's in the wrong paragraph? Nevertheless, since it has all these together, the fire, the wood, the fire, and on the Mizbeach, what is an animal that's placed fresh, right, on the wood, right, and that not and that's something that was there before? Well, that's only the first thing that's put on the Mizbeach, which is the Korban Tamid, which is a lamb. And so this is, right, the wood provided special for it and not wood that was already there from something before. So even though it's in the first paragraph, it's hinting, belonging to the second one. And that concludes our first discussion, right? We have 3 sources. The last one is accepted, that a non-Kohen can skin and cut the Korban Tamid. Now we go on to a non-Kohen who arranges the wood and that is liable. Let's see how we know that. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan, right, the greatest sage in Eretz Yisrael, taught Zar shesideret hamaracha chayav. A non-Kohen who arranges the wood, chayav mita. So that's not good. Kesadu oseh porka v'chozeh v'sodra. Now the question is, okay, what do you do? He arranged the wood. It's already arranged. So now what should we do with the wood, right? It's already done. So maya hanile, right? Aela porka zar v'sod kesadu oseh porka v'chozeh v'sodra. So you know what you're going to do? No problem. You'll have a Kohen who will go and take it apart and put it back together. See, that way, it's the Kohen that did it at the end, so the Yisrael didn't end up actually doing anything significant. So you got to redo it. The question is, Maya Hanile, what's the point if the Kohen is just going to undo it and do it again? Ela por kazar v'sodra Kohen, better have a non-Kohen take it apart, and then the Kohen will put it together. So then the Kohen is doing something productive, and then the pyre is ready to go. All right, so that was Rabbi Yochanan's teaching that a non-Kohen would be chayav. We have a question from Rabbi Zera. Matkif la Rabbi Zera, his student. V'chi yesh lecha avoda shekeshera balayla upesula bezar. Can it be that something that you can do at night and that yet a non-Kohen is not allowed to do it? His point is, usually every avodah is done during the day. If it's something that's done at night, then it's not a real avodah. If it's not a real avodah, then it should be able to be done by a non-Kohen, because you only need a Kohen to do a real avodah. And so since this arranging of the wood is done at night before dawn, therefore it should be a non-Kohen should be fine. So that's his question to Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to question the question of Rabbi Zera. Is this true that anything that's done at night, a non-Kohen can do? What about the bringing of the limbs and putting them on the fire? That's done after sunset at the end of the day, that the Kohanim would put them on. And that has to be done by Kohanim, even though it's at night, right? The answer is Sof Avodah Dimamahi. Yeah, technically it's done when it's dark, but really it's just the finishing of a process that was started during the day. Right? You did all the animals during the day, you did the shechita and the blood, and this is just completing the process. So it is a daytime service, even though technically we're doing it at night. That's why Kohanim do have to do it. Cleaning off of the mizbeach, the ashes, taking some of the ashes, that's done before dawn, right? Maybe sometimes at midnight, sometimes even earlier. And that's a nighttime thing, and it has to be done by a kohen. The answer to that is techilat avodat imamahi. Even though technically it's to be done, but done at night, it's really the beginning of the daytime service. So it is a real service, and that's why a kohen has to do it. We have a proof for that, a proof that we already saw earlier. Amarabi asi, Amarabi Yochanan, kidesh yadav litrumat hadeshin, lemachar eno sarich lekadesh, shekivar kidesh metechilat avodah. Before a kohen does any service, he has to wash his hands and his feet. And Rabbi Yochanan teaches that if he washed his hands and his feet for Terumat Hadeshin, back in the middle of the night, when it gets light out, he doesn't have to do it again, right? Because he already did it. So what does that teach? That shows that Terumat Hadeshin is in fact a continuation. It's the beginning of the service that will continue during the day. So even though it's done when it's dark out, it's still considered the beginning of the day, and that's why a non-Kohen has to do it. So therefore, we just upheld Rabbi Zera's question. Rabbi Zera's question stands. The question is, anything that's a nighttime service, and we're talking about the arranging of the woods. The arranging of the wood is not the beginning or end of anything, it's just a nighttime service. If it's a nighttime service and it's not a real avodah, and therefore a non-Kohen should be fine doing it. Why did Yochanan say that he's chayav? Ella kashya. That's our question. So now we need an answer. Ella ki itmad hachi itmad. You know what? We're going to rephrase what Rabbi Yochanan said. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, zar shesider shene gezirei atzim hayav. Ho'il v'avodat yom hi. So we're changing from sider shene gezirei atzim. What he said earlier was sideret ma'aracha, right? There's actually two steps. The first step is arranging the wood pile, the general one, and then after that, we bring two special logs and add them on. So that adding of the special logs, that is something that's done during the day, and that's why you're right, chayav. So really we're agreeing that the arranging of the wood, a non-Kohen would be patur. But it's these two logs. So il avodat yom hi. Okay, good. So Rabbi Zera is satisfied, but Rava is not satisfied. Matkif la Rava ela me'ata tiba'e payis. If in fact this is a daytime service, then it should require a lottery, right? Any daytime service that a kohen has to do requires a lottery. So how come there's no lottery for adding the two logs? That's his question. Well, it turns out not such a good question because we mentioned in the Braita that whichever Kohen won the lottery for cleaning off the ashes, he also gets to arrange the wood and put the last two logs on. So you see, there is a lottery. You're right, it's not a separate lottery just for that, because you remember that no one wanted to do Terumat Hadeshin, right? Because no one wanted to show up to the lottery because it's not so important. So they said, okay, if you do that, then you get to also put the two logs on. And so then people were excited about it. So there is a lottery, in fact, for this. So Rava's question is easily answered. Okay, even though we answered Rava's question, we want to go back and add more problems to his question, right? What was Rava even thinking? His question assumed that any daytime service requires a lottery, but not a nighttime service. Hold on. How about putting the limbs of the animal on the mizbeach? Isn't that a nighttime service? And that does require a lottery. We had the lottery, all those people. Although if assuming that they're the same ones, or the fourth lottery, right? The person who brings it on. So that does have a lottery. No, sof avodah dimamahi. No, that's not a nighttime service. It's a daytime service. It's just continuing what was needed during the day. Happens to be in the night, but it's really a daytime service. Okay, no problem with that. What about the cleaning off? But the cleaning off of the korban, right? That's a nighttime service. The cleaning off of the ashes, and that's done at night. So it's a nighttime service, and yet it requires a lottery. The answer here is different from the one we said above. Mishum maaseh shehaya. No, you're right. It doesn't require a lottery. Remember, at the beginning, they would say whoever shows up first, right, can do Terumat Hadeshin. And if there's more than one person, they do a runner-up, literally runner-up, right? And they do a race. Only because there was a problem and someone pushed the other one, That's why they made a lottery. But really, technically, you do not need a lottery for Terumat Addition because it is a nighttime service. So we answered the question, right? Rabbi is in fact correct. Daytime service requires a lottery. A nighttime service does not. But one more question on Rava's question. The other assumption behind Rava's question was that if it is a daytime service and a non-Kohen is chayav, then it requires a lottery, right? So anything that a non-Kohen cannot do requires a lottery. Hold on, is that true? If a non-Kohen is not liable, then you don't need a lottery. So Abraham, this is your question, right? Shechita can be done by a non-Kohen. So why do you need a lottery if a non-Kohen can do it? So the answer is Shane Shechita the Tchilat Avodahi. The Shechita is in fact the beginning of the service that the Kohanim are going to do. And therefore, it's very important. And so it does require a lottery, even though you're right, technically a non-Kohen can do it. Amar Morzut Ravi Temarav Hashe v'ha'anan latinan hachi amar le'amemune seur ui migia zeman ha'shechita ve'elu zeman shenei gezirei atzim laketane. So Mazutra says, hold on, I'm not sure about this, what you said regarding the arranging of the logs, that it would have to be done in the daytime, right? Why do you consider the arranging of the logs a daytime service? After all, we said in the Mishnah that in the beginning of the day, when it gets light out, the attendant says, go see if the time of Shechita came. And you go see if it's light out, and so that we can start the Shechita of the Korban Tamid. So that means the Shechita is the first thing that needs to be done during the day. He doesn't say, go see if it's light out to see if we can put the two logs on, which means the logs can be put anytime. Otherwise, you'd want to make sure that when you put the logs on, it's daytime. So therefore, that's the question, right? Maybe the logs can actually be done at night. And that would then say, then a non-Kohen could do it. The answer, look at Tani. So the answer is, in this edition, they repeated these words by mistake. This is a type of mistake you find a lot of manuscripts, and I'm disappointed that it's in this new printed edition. This mistake happens when you have a same phrase that's repeated. You see this phrase ends with lokatani, and the next one also ends lokatani. So sometimes a scribe's eye will skip to the next one and skip it altogether. Sometimes they'll repeat it because they'll say, oh, I wrote this lokatani, and then go back and repeat it. Anyway, these words do not belong. They're not in the Vilna printed edition. They don't belong anywhere. Okay. Anyway, the point to here is that it's an answer. Laketane. Wait, what do you mean? Are you really? Why are you saying it's not? It's not mentioned. You're right. We don't mention it, but we have a good reason not to mention it. That which has no way to fix it. We have to say that we have to make an announcement. In other words, the shechita. Once you do shechita, it's done, right? You can't redo shechita. The animal's head is severed. So before we do shechita, we want to make sure it's light out because we can't redo it. But they're putting on the two logs of wood. That's something you can redo. If you put them on and it turns out, oh, you know what? It wasn't sunset yet. Now it's sunset. No problem. Take them off and put them back on. And so since you could just go and do it again, so we don't need to make a whole announcement. But in fact, this is in fact a daytime service. And because putting on the logs is a daytime service, that's why a non-Kohen would be liable if they did it. All right, we're going to have a couple more questions and answers about that statement of Rabbi Yochanan, but we'll leave that for tomorrow when we hope to complete the second perek. Baruch Adonai Be'olam, amen, amen.